next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
How's it going, everybody? It is February 25th, 2026. It is Wednesday night, which means it is Operation Gladio night, and the show is live because there's always somebody that's going to ask. You guys, welcome to Chapter 89, Episode 523 of the AlphaWarrior Show, excluding special events and shows. Psyops, past and present. I'm really going to have a good time with this. Maybe we can find a way to stretch this one into 2 parts or 3 parts. But with that, folks, I'm going to bring the Colonel on screen, and then we got a surprise for you. Colonel, welcome. Hi. And here is the surprise, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. Just wow. Just wow. Like, wow. I mean, I'm ready to go to the movies.
I know.
Fantastic job, Colonel. Fantastic job. I mean, if you wanted to encapsulate, what you've done into a trailer to set up your podcast, that was perfection. Like, that was really good.
It's been in my head for like 2 years. I've played that without having it in my head for like 2 years. And it was so incredible to be able to convey what my vision was and then have them send that back to me. Because that was their first take. I wouldn't have changed a thing. They listened to everything that I said that I wanted included. It's a masterpiece. The guys that did it were amazing.
Phenomenal work. Phenomenal work. Like, it's just like, hello. I'm gonna have to make a phone call to somebody.
Yeah.
I'll tell the audience. When have you deployed it just yet? I don't think you have just yet, right?
No, I've actually put it on my
right on.
It's pinned on my X profile as the highlight thing, and then I played it the last 2 shows that I've done.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Go to X, get the Colonel's pin post, and put that thing on blast.
Sure. Yes.
We need to get it out there. Before we get into Psyops, past and present, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let me pay a bill real quick, folks, and then we'll have one a little bit later on mid-show, and then we'll go from there. So, of course, I'm going to give Rumble some love. They can cancel your accounts, freeze your cards, decide what you're allowed to buy, say, or support. Big banks and financial institutions have total control, and they use it. That's why financial independence matters more now than ever. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a wallet built for freedom. With Rumble Wallet, you control your money, not a bank, not a government, not a tech company. Buy digital assets like Tether Gold, and Bitcoin in one secure place, no permission, no middleman, no cancel button. And when you want to support the creators you actually believe in, you can use the Rumble Wallet app to directly tip creators securely, instantly, without any interference. Right around there, folks. This isn't a credit line. They shut it off. It's your wallet permanently. Yours to protect your future, yours to protect your family. When the system fails, when the institutions turn on their people, financial sovereignty is the difference between security and vulnerability. Rumble Wallet isn't about politics. It's about freedom, ownership, and protecting what's yours. So take control today, download Rumble Wallet, and step away from the big banks for good, true ownership, true protection, true financial freedom. And a shout out to Rumble, folks, because without them, my voice would have been sunk. X, Twitter had censored me, YouTube censored me, DLive censored me, Twitch censored me. You name the platform, we were removed from it. And so one of the things you guys can do to kind of say thank you is go and get that Rumble Wallet, and let's help create this parallel economy. Colonel, Psyops. Yeah, so let me just say this. this is particularly important to me. You know, I've had people say, how much does General Flynn pay you to play that ad every single show? And I say nothing. I get a commission if anybody goes and buys the book, but that's it. It to me, understanding psyops, understanding psychological warfare is so important to the win. Like if I had $1 million, I'd just go buy 1 million books and just, or however many books $1 million combined, because they're not $1. But y'all get what I'm trying to say, right? And I would just distribute them because they're that important. So where are you taking us today? I'm pumped about this.
So I think it's important. So we've talked about psyops that's been used in different Gladio style events along the way as it supported the narrative of that particular show. We've not done one that actually looks at the body of what the CIA has done, and mainly what they're capable of doing kind of as a project. And it could definitely fill 2 shows, that's for sure. And we'll just see how this goes, because I think setting the premise for it, and then in many ways I'm gonna kind of turn the tables on you, because I think a lot of the work that you do talks about and has laid bare some of the current psyops that are being played on us, over the last 8 years. And so that may be the 2 shows, but I think laying the foundation post World War II. So the first thing, if you start looking into psychological operations, the first thing you're going to find on most websites indicates that the first iteration or formal recognition of it, and of course, at the time it was classified, but they set up a psychological strategy board. And most websites will say that that was technically set up like in 1951 timeframe, but that's not actually true. It was actually set up by Truman. It was just called something different, and it was basically a sub office of the National Security Council. And that's important in and of itself. So in 1947, the National Defense Authorization Act, which created the Air Force, the Department of Defense, and basically the what we now call the War Department, but the defense, the government defense apparatus. It also created the CIA. It of course, had a couple of different names, but we're just going to, for simplicity, call it the CIA from the get-go. So they had decided that psychological operations was so important during World War II, basically thanks to the OSS and kind of the smoke and mirror portions of that we needed to retain that capability. There was a big pissing contest on where it was going to be. Now, I want everyone to understand how important this is. The State Department thought they wanted, the State Department wanted control of psychological operations. Think about that for a second. The State Department. That's like crazy. And of course, the new Secretary of Defense wanted it, because their thought was it should only be used when you're actually, conducting foreign operations. And the new CIA is going, no, you don't understand how this works. This really needs to be in ours, because we're the only one that has covert operations during peacetime authority. And so they went back and forth. It, of course, ultimately ends up in the CIA as kind of like the peacetime director of psychological operations. But as this is going on, this kind of tug of war, it was always going to be under the direction of the National Security Council, which also got set up in 1947. Now, most people think that the National Security Council basically kind of looks across the different government spectrum as an advisor to the president on things that are actually national security, right? Psychological operations has literally nothing to do with national security, like our country's security. Nothing. It is part and parcel of forward projected operations, not like batten down the hatches and we're just going to protect ourselves, which is what most people think when you think National Security Council. Now, we know that the National Security Council is operational. We know that it is kind of the nerve center for directing covert operations. Iran-Contra was ran out of there. Basically, every time that they've used our stay behind capabilities in orchestrating what I would refer to as domestic terror events, it has always come out of the National Security Council. And most people don't know that. But it is very operational. It is not just a coordination hub. So they set up a thing called the Psychological Strategy Board in 1951. And we were just covering this in the book that we're doing called Save for Democracy. And the irony of just perusing through the Psychological Strategy Board, you come across the guy that Truman actually hired to do this. He didn't officially become part of the strategy board until it was actually constituted in the early 1950s. But what's most important about it is Gordon Gray Sr. is the guy basically that was hired to do this by Eisenhower once it became an official entity. And he's interesting for kind of highlighting Operation Gladio and the International Syndicate, because what was Gordon Gray's claim to fame as he takes on this Psychological Strategy Board? Oh, well, he's the heir apparent and chairman of the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. So he's like the ultimate oligarch, right? Money going way back. Oh, and he also just so happens to be at this time the president of a university in North Carolina. What? He's in charge of a university while he's running the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company and sitting on the Psychological Strategy Board. And I just found his background to be absolutely crazy. He also, there was one other thing. What am I missing? He was, yeah. Well, I almost forgot. He owned a massive North Carolina media company, Empire. Okay, so in this one guy who's going to start the psychological operations, basically as we know it today, owns a media company, is an oligarch, and in charge of a university while he's sitting in charge of basically the Psychological Strategy Board. So you've got kids to brainwash, you're an oligarch, and you're controlling a media empire.
He called his media company Triangle Broadcasting. It's like Illuminati much?
Yeah. Is that crazy?
It is. Especially, it shows he definitely had an understanding of media.
Exactly. And just to kind of highlight that, the domestic media, not just foreign media, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to give that background as we kind of dig into this. So for our purposes, so obviously it was started in the 1940s, in the late 40s. We don't find out about any of this until the mid 1970s during the church committee, the Pike committee, when basically all of the CIA's dirty laundry gets aired to the American public. So people are most familiar with the church committee that basically was the Senate Select Committee on government operations with respect to intelligence activities. That's the whole name of it. Basically what they did were they were investigating abuses by the CIA, FBI, NSA, and other agencies. It was during these hearings that it became very apparent, because of the testimony, that the CIA had systematically used journalists in America and foreign, and media outlets, both domestic and foreign, as tools of propaganda, surveillance, and influence operations. In the document called Alleged Assassination Plots Involving Foreign Leaders, there were several comments. I think the actual report was released in 1976, and some of the headlines was CIA's use of the press. And basically what gets disclosed is that the press had been weaponized and used as an extension of their covert activities. The report detailed relationships with over 400 American journalists, partnerships with major media corporations, like actually owning part of media companies through front companies. And of course, this was done not just here, but it was done in foreign countries. So it basically says that the CIA's, for the media, it was a way of infiltration, and they actually posed as they had a whole bunch of agents that basically were pretending to be journalists so that they could go around the world and talk to world leaders in using all of their psychological spycraft, but posing as journalists. And back then there was a lot of hoopla from honest journalists saying, you're going to get us all killed. You know, if it gets out to the world, which of course it did in the 70s, that I'm just as likely as a reporter to be a CIA agent as I am to be a reporter, then basically you've just killed the media. And that in fact was true. And if you talk to other people in foreign countries, they're well aware of the use of journalists as CIA agents. It's just the unwitting American public that doesn't seem to understand that is a very common practice. And of course, if you carry that forward to today, who's the new journalist? Social media influencers. And if you think that the CIA agents posing as journalists back then is not the equivalent of many of these social media influencers today, sitting in Langley, pretending to be your favorite person posting crap on X or some other social media, you're crazy.
I agree completely. And here's just something for people to think about. It's so simple. And I thought about this in the beginning when I was like, I was literally working 3 jobs. And I was, you know, on Twitter at the time. And I'd see other people that every time I went on, they were on. And I was like, these people aren't retired. How do they pay their bills? You know? And then it was just like, well, if this is their job, who are they working for?
Exactly. And then, of course, you have to pile on that, which there's a lot of people out there that do a really great job, and go scanning through and see how many people post the exact same post, right? almost on demand. So just something to keep in the back of your head when you're looking across the spectrum of information that we have today. It is not the model today that it was in the 1950s. Every single iteration of whether it's television, movies, we go to cable TV, whatever the media forum is, they are there. Period. Okay. So when the report in the 1970s originally got released, there was over 200 pages that had redactions on them. So even though they kind of released information, they hid a lot of the quote unquote released information. But there was enough there to be very damning. Their finding was the relationship between the CIA and the press has been an extensive collaboration, which of my thought was basically it's not really even a collaboration. It's a co-opting of the media. Because in many cases, these journalists were not even given the option of not participating in it. Through the editors, they had the Georgetown Club in DC that had all of the big, like Catherine Graham of the Washington Post and those types of people, where they would get together at dinner parties and literally collude to carry whatever water needed to be carried as far as messaging. The CIA had a relationship with those 400 media people that they basically were just handing them stuff for them to put their byline on, their name on it, and publish it. It was already written. They're the people that, like we saw during Russiagate, that gets all of the leaks. If they're getting leaks, they're an asset. Hands down. Okay. The CIA didn't just seek friendly coverage. It actually embedded agents, paid the stringers. And for those of you who don't know what that is, there are journalists that are not actually on the payroll of the Washington Post that they go out in the field and write stories. They're called stringers, or they've got like a string to the Washington Post attached to them. And they submit stories to the Washington Post. Some of those stringers were basically being paid by the CIA out in the field, like foreign correspondents, to write stories based on what they wanted. And what they would do is they would seed stories in overseas areas. Sometimes the CIA would actually own the media company in the CIA country. And so if we're going to go overthrow a country, they would literally buy media entities. And then they would write stories, and they'd have the stringer take those stories back to the mainstream media here, so that everything that we saw here in the lead up to a coup was basically being written in the field by CIA. That's how bad this is. So obviously we talked about it going back to the OSS and the creation of their propaganda. And basically all they did was, Wild Bill Donovan kind of just passed the baton to Alan Dulles for him to continue what they had already orchestrated through the OSS. During World War II, during the time that it was the OSS, there were OSS officers that actually pretended to be journalists as well. And the journalists, other than the ones pretending to be journalists, they had other journalists on the OSS payroll that basically would go into the contested areas as a journalist, like a wartime journalist. And then you go back to Iraq and all of those other where they actually had embedded reporters. How many of those were actually CIA? I don't know the answer to that, but I can bet you that there were several of them that were.
The ones with the big stories, I would imagine, probably were.
I would say that's a very good guess. Okay. So the entity that was created in 1947 was called the International Organizations Division, that then became the Psychological Strategy Board. And even during that transition period, in the 1950, under the International Organizations Division, they funneled millions of dollars to media fronts. That was actually in a declassified CIA internal memo. Quote, the purpose of the program is to influence the opinion of foreign publics in a manner favorable to the United States, unquote. The influence abroad quickly bled into domestic manipulation. By the 1950s, CIA was subsidizing magazines, newspapers, and even radio broadcasts inside the United States. And if you look at other entities that kind of go along with this whole psychological operations of influencing people, the CIA set up the Congress for Cultural Freedom. It was referred to as the CCF. It was 100% a CIA-funded intellectual front that sponsored writers, artists, and events like movie screenings. The report quotes a 1967 CIA IG report, quote, the CCF was created by the CIA as a propaganda weapon against the Soviet Union, unquote. Prominent figures like Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and Sidney Hook participated in it. The CIA used these networks to plant stories that eventually would come back here to influence Americans. They basically shaped every foreign interference, whether it was the Italian election in 1948 or the Korean War, the Vietnam War. All of those were part of this psychological operations, primarily focused on Americans to support or brainwash us into supporting the activities that the CIA was doing. The report also says, quote, by the mid-1950s, the CIA had established relationships with a number of news organizations, newspapers, periodicals, and radio and television networks, unquote. Let's see.
Let me jump in on this pause to drop a real quick ad. And if you guys will do me a solid while we're doing this, hit the heart and smash the thumb and help me get this podcast out there into the algorithm. And I would appreciate that very much. So with that, you should see a QR code on your screen, MCG Tactical. This is super cool. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to shoot with the same precision tech used by U.S. Special Forces? I know you guys have. Don't play like you haven't. Well, good news. After years of research and development, MCG Tactical just dropped something incredible, the Stinger Combat Sight. This isn't your average red dot. Using holographic technology, once reserved for elite military and law enforcement, the Stinger delivers crystal clear precision, so accurate you can hit a dime at 300 yards without even trying. This is the exact same level of technology used by the pros, but here's the twist. Most sites like this go for $600 or more, and people happily pay it. I have. But right now, through an exclusive deal with MCG Tactical, you can get this mil-spec sight for under $200. And it gets better. For my listeners, you get 67% off. That's covering the shipping. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to mcgtac.com, mcgtac.com/alpha to get yours today. The only catch, supplies are tight, and these are already flying off the shelves. So if you want a site built for the best, now's your shot. Grab yours before they have to shut down the orders. Again, ladies and gentlemen, limited supply on these stinger sites. Go to mcgtac.com/alpha. Take a screenshot of that QR code while it's on the screen, or the links will be down in the description if you're watching the replay. I have spent a lot of money on sites. just saying. So sites and lights. You never go cheap on your sites, and you never go cheap on your lights. Ever, folks. Get the good stuff. Go ahead, Colonel.
Only if you want to be effective.
Exactly.
And so most people focus, anytime we talk about psychological operations or the infiltration of the media by the CIA, they focus exclusively on Operation Mockingbird. But this is so much bigger than just the limited scope of Mockingbird. And so Mockingbird, as basically you can gather in what's been declassified, and Carl Bernstein, who broke the story in 1977 in a Rolling Stones article, basically what, I don't want to say the word limited, but it basically focused on the CIA director, Alan Dulles, approving the recruitment of media executives in the 1950s. But it was so much broader than that. But Mockingbird kind of focused in on that. The Senate report detailed that in 1953, the CIA began a program to provide direct financial support to individual journalists and media organizations. A quote from the CIA Deputy Director of Plans, Richard Helms' testimony, quote, "We had relationships with people in the press who were willing to cooperate with us," unquote. He basically kind of downplayed it using the words friendly contacts. But basically, there were instances where people in the media didn't necessarily want to cooperate, but they were blackmailed into doing it. CIA paid journalists to plant stories or intelligence gathering. The report says, quote, "Some journalists were paid retainers ranging from $500 to $10,000 a year." This is in 1950. That's a lot of money. In today's dollar, I computed the 10,000. It'd be basically $100,000 a year.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So the media outlets receive CIA subsidies disguised as grants or advertising. CBS, Time Inc., and New York Times were all implicated. So is the Washington Post. Quotes from the report: "The agency relationship with CBS was particularly close. William Paley, Paley, the network's founder, was a personal friend of several of the CIA directors: Dulles, Helms, Colby, Casey, all of those guys. Their Stringer network, which I just basically mentioned, are freelance journalists abroad reporting back to Langley while filing articles for U.S. papers. The report says, quote, "In many cases, the Stringers were unaware that their reporting was being used for intelligence purposes, but others, many others, knowingly did it." The reports revealed the domestic spillover. While the CIA was barred by its charter from operating in the U.S., it basically skirted this by using proxies. The committee has found that the CIA had relationships with American journalists. I'm trying to remember what the two brothers, I'll remember it in a minute, but they were part of the Georgetown set, and they basically were serving as a PR front for the CIA. if we look at the 1954 Guatemalan coup, which kind of was obviously the Iranian one happened the year before, but the Guatemalan coup in America got a lot more press. The CIA orchestrated the overthrow of President Jacobo Arbenz, and the American media basically provided the kind of the narrative of justification for why that had to happen. The report quotes a CIA memo. We provided background briefings to selected journalists who in turn wrote stories sympathetic to the anti-Arbenz forces, unquote, meaning the military dictatorship that they were planning on installing there got great press, while the democratically elected president was demonized in American press thanks to the CIA. Outlets like the New York Times ran pieces that echoed CIA talking points, framing the coup as a anti-communist, even though all of the CIA cables at the time was saying there's no communists down here. And of course, the real story behind it was that United Fruit Company was basically orchestrating, or the CIA was acting on its behalf, and nowhere in any press was that ever mentioned. It's not because it wasn't known. It was very well known, and it was reported in Latin America papers constantly about what was really going on. That they basically, the stories that I've read, which you can now translate thanks to all of the technology, is it was a widely held belief that United Fruit had basically hired the CIA to come down there and overthrow the government, which is kind of what they did. Vietnam, this got much worse. And of course, that was in the 60s and early 70s. So the report went on to detail how the CIA had used journalists to counter anti-war sentiment. During the Vietnam War, the agency provided information to reporters on the ground, often under the guise of official briefings. Philip Graham, part of the Washington Post Graham family, reportedly told a CIA officer, as cited in testimony, quote, "You fellows control the news," unquote. This is the Washington Post guy that owns it, is telling the Congress that he told the CIA that they basically own the news. While the report redacted many names, if you cross-reference what they're saying, Alsop, that's the guy's name. I knew I'd come across it. Joseph Alsop, ALSOP, and C.D. Jackson, who was at Time Life at the time. That's who he's referring to. They were basically owned by the CIA.
Well, while you're moving on to the next thought with that, that's still, I see it, Colonel, in my opinion. I still see it in play now.
Oh, absolutely.
But beyond the ones that know they're getting a check, like, hey, I'm doing this for you. I'm a stringer. Here's my check. I'm working. But there's also been the subliminal recruitment. And what I mean by that is when Twitter shifted to a monetization platform and then created rules on how and who was going to get monetized, now you started to see people shift their content in the direction that kept them in the box to get paid. If I say this, I'm going to get a check. I'm going to get a disqualifier, and they're going to remove my ability to be monetized. So I better not say this. And on top of that, it escalated from people preventing themselves from being demonetized to people then started to pick up, well, if I say these things, this is in the trending zone. Yes. And now I get more pay, which now amplifies any agenda that the CIA does. All they got to do is control the algorithm.
That's exactly, and that's what I knew you would add to this whole thing. The current, if you don't understand what they're capable of doing in the past, you don't consider what you just said, and what you just said is profound. That's exactly the manipulation that occurs in modern day based on what we know they did in the past.
Because how do you catch somebody? Where's the I gotcha? It's literally you've created behavioral changes in society, which is what a psyop is, everybody.
Yes.
Just go look up the definitions. I mean, the only defense against it, granted, there's probably ways to get the people at the top that create this long term. But like, even if you went, like, let's just say today, Colonel, you know, Elon said, "Hey, we're going to stop monetization." It's still going to take a while for people to kick that behavioral habit that they've adapted to. And it's still going to
Mhm.
get exploited because then what I would imagine the Mockingbird, Operation Mockingbird is going to do then is, well, let's incentivize popularity. And then that becomes the new monetization.
Yep. Yeah. I mean,
I
that's the perfect interpretation of what we're learning about what they did in the past to modify behavior, app and how it applies today, which I knew you would be the perfect person to do the show with for that reason, because 'cause you're in that space all the time and you see exactly what's happening. And you have been, on many occasions, the first one that calls it out.
it's when I was in law enforcement, and this kind of comes off the cartel conversation that's been happening a lot the last couple of days. And I was having this conversation with Joshua. Was like, man, when we used to get these safety bulletins, I used to tell myself, if people knew like the stuff we get in these bulletins, they wouldn't travel to Mexico or Puerto Vallarta or Cancun or anything like that. Baja. Most people probably wouldn't even leave their city if they knew this stuff. And so now when I look at like the conversations we're having, it's like if people knew like the shadow war that's happening in the palm of your hand, and you've heard me say this, Colonel, like if you go onto social media thinking you're going onto a social media app, you've already lost. Like that mindset, they already got you. Like you have to understand that even when you're going in there to have a good time and have fun, maybe catch some sporting stuff, and that's been weaponized. That sucks. It's all an agenda. And granted, there's people that want to say, "Oh, it's the Jews, or it's the Muslim Brotherhood, or it's this, or it's that." Everybody that has a dollar in the fight has a group of operatives or stringers or contractors or whatever you want to call them. They have
Mhm.
these digital stay behinds that are in these platforms to push their agenda. And people think I'm exaggerating, Colonel. I truly do believe in my heart that when we go into these virtual town halls, that more than half the people that are speaking are working for somebody.
I would agree with that 100%. I just had someone send me an article about a grassroots effort that was trying to, get people at local levels to kind of nationally loosely organize, to be able to manage things at the precinct level, as far as getting people engaged and, providing information, basically networking, as it relates to elections. And the people had not even gotten past go, and they were attacked immediately. They were infiltrated. Um, so that happens in real life, that happens, online, that happens everywhere. Anything that they view is a way for all of us collectively to fight back will instantly be attacked.
There was a comment that came through YouTube. I'll bring it up on the screen real quick. This comes from Half Truth 1708. It says the Challenger explosion was the kickoff for Gen X. You Now when I see comments like that, I'm like, maybe, like maybe that how far back does this go? I mean, look at what we're talking about here. That was several decades ago.
Yeah.
I don't discount things like that. I'm constantly, wondering, what it is, and me and Colonel have had private conversations. I'm constantly reevaluating the information. and people that I'm working with, just because you don't know.
Everything. Once you have your Gladio's glasses on, you have to question everything.
Yeah, I mean,
Everything.
and I'll give it back to you here. Did you hear about you remember the movie series that came out a while ago, The Hunger Games?
Yes.
Hunger Games. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And Katniss, they call her the Mockingjay, right? And when you guys go in and you look, you read up on this, the Mockingjay was their symbol, as they couldn't be controlled by the government. And it's like, we know Operation Mockingbird, and it's like it's the opposite. It's exactly how we're controlled by the government. So it's like, do they troll us in these movies? Like, we're just gonna put it right in front of you because you don't even know.
Well, I think we proved that with the A-Team, right?
Yeah, oh, that one hurt.
We've been trolled for a very long time. Yeah, that happened to me in my space. I think it was on Tuesday. Yesterday, somebody brought up something, and of course, I don't watch movies, so I had to go over there when they brought it up, and I'm reading it, and I'm going, "Oh yeah, that's CIA," because they had asked, "Do you what's your opinion of this movie? Was it like pre-programming or whatever?" And I mean, I hadn't even got 2 paragraphs down in the plot, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's it."
I mean,
So
in the movie, they're literally taking advantage of scenes where there's bodies and smoke and debris to sell a narrative.
yes,
And it's like, what makes you think that they don't do that now?
they do it every day.
Yes,
All
indeed.
right. So back to the Mockingbird. Addressing the New York Times, the report said the Times has had a long-standing relationship with the CIA dating back to the 50s. Publisher, author Ox Sulzberger allegedly allowed the CIA assets to use Times credentials. A direct quote from a CIA file. Sulzberger agreed that the agency could use Time correspondence for cover when necessary. So you have no idea who on the Times is CIA and who's not. Time Magazine and Life, which was Henry Luce's empire, and his wife, remember, Claire Booth Luce, was the Rome ambassador as part of Operation Gladio. So her husband owned the Henry Luce empire, media empire of Time Life magazine, was a CIA darling. The report quotes, Luce personally met with the CIA officials to discuss cooperation. Times correspondents, like Richard Helms, before he became the CIA director, he actually worked there, and others were actual double agents. So Richard Helms himself was one of these people posing as a media person. Just FYI. CBS News is noted. William Polly greenlit CIA access. The document reveals, quote, CIA or CBS correspondents were used to gather intelligence in Eastern Europe and Latin America. The guy that was in charge of the news division was in on it. The Associated Press and UPI wire services provided global reach. CIA maintained close relationships with AP executives who facilitated the placement of agency officers as reporters. Notable journalist. We mentioned the Alsop brothers. Joseph was a syndicated columnist and asset for the CIA. The report implies his access to classified information. Quote, Alsop received briefings from high-level agency sources on foreign policy matters, unquote. His brother Stuart was also a columnist and a consultant for the CIA. A quote relating to him, the Alsops were among the most prominent members of the fourth branch of government that created the intelligence agencies, unquote. James Reston was a Times executive editor and a CIA asset. The report noted Reston attended luncheons with agency officials discussing sensitive matters. Let's see. There's another guy, Charles Moore, who was a New York Times, that actually wrote articles for them. The committee, in its discussion with CIA Director William Colby, admitted, quote, "We had about 30 full-time newsmen on our payroll." But according to people like Bernstein, it was closer to 400. The CIA actions violated its charter in every way. The Smith-Munn Act, which everybody says, oh, we need it back. I don't know why, because it didn't matter. And nobody was ever held accountable when they violated it. Another quote from the report: "The use of American journalists in intelligence operation poses a serious threat to the integrity of the press." Well, at this point, the press has no integrity. Such relationships inevitably raise questions about whether a journalist's independence is compromised. Even if a journalist does not allow his work to be influenced, the existence of others doing that brings them all into question. According to the National Security Act of 1947, it prohibited the CIA from doing any domestic operations at all. But it has been revealed repeatedly that they have done these operations, and not a single person has ever been held accountable.
I brought up a article real quick on the screen, Colonel, just to remind everybody, because this was just mid last year. USAID funded 6,200 journalists, supported 707 media outlets globally.
And USAID is just a CIA front.
Yep.
So one former CIA officer, Arthur Haynes, quote, "We trained journalists to report in a way that advanced our objectives without revealing their sources," unquote. The report also talked about foreign press. The CIA propped up outlets like Radio Free Europe and infiltrated others. In Western Europe, the agency subsidized publications such as Encounter magazine. They didn't subsidize Encounter. Encounter was owned, and it was basically a CIA front. That was exposed in 1967. Okay, the report detailed Frank Wisner's creation of the Office of Public Coordination in 1948, which oversaw the CIA's basic, what will soon be the CIA's propaganda. Because in 1951, at the same time that psychological strategy board was being created, the OPC, Frank Wisner's office, merged with the clandestine service, which is the covert operations, and it basically became one big ball of worms. There was a document that was found where the CIA lead counsel, Lawrence Houston, who is the same guy that wrote the opinion that the CIA was not allowed to do covert operations, and they did them anyway, said in 1954, quote, "The use of American journalists could lead to a scandal if discovered." Well, it didn't, because it was discovered and nothing was ever done about it. During the Bay of Pigs in 1961, the failed cover stories implicated media ties, leading to a temporary purge. And by that, basically what it's saying is that I don't know if I've actually told this story, but during Cuba, the original Bay of Pigs plan was to have all of the aircraft take off from Guatemala in that area, Honduras, and fly to do the bombing raids over Cuba. But one particular pilot was supposed to take off and come directly to the United States. His cover story was he's dressed up like a Cuban Air Force guy, that he had defected from Cuba that day, because what the CIA was trying to do was create the cover story that the bombing was not from the CIA aircraft. It was from Castro's Air Force pilots that were defecting, that they took off from Cuba, swung around and bombed Cuba, and then they were all going to come here, defecting, when none of them were actually from Cuba or the Cuban Air Force. So to get the jump on that story, they took one of the aircraft, flew it directly to Miami, landed it, and that pilot was supposed to be the cover story for how they were going to spin the media on what was going on with the Bay of Pigs. Unfortunately, that very day when he's landing, one of the reporters who had taken a picture of the plane and put it in print that day, they ran the story that day because he came in the morning, if I recall correctly, and immediately all of the military people in the Miami area was like, that's not a Cuban plane. That model aircraft is not, it was the same model aircraft that the Cubans had, but it was configured differently, completely differently. And it was immediately noticed. And that's the reason why Kennedy did not allow the second wave of aircraft to bomb, because the cat was already out of the bag. Now, the Cuban exiles will tell you that that's not true, that that everything I just said is absolutely true. But what they will tell you is, no, Kennedy called off that second wave of aircraft because he was a chicken shit. And that's absolutely not true. The cat was already out of the bag. So that's a failure in their ability to control the media, because that one little picture kind of blew the entire operation as being organically Cuban.
Which is why we have to put out posts when we see these patterns to get ahead of the agenda, because one little post can equal that one little picture.
That's exactly right. And I think that's so incredibly important today, because how many false flags has happened since the Ukrainian war, like the false missile into Poland. And within 24 hours, people have completely dissected the thing and stopped another false flag. I mean, within 24 hours. They simply cannot do this in today's day and age.
Without censorship.
Without censorship. Very good point. Okay. So we have Watergate. We have Vietnam. The committee's investigation revealed that there were document shredding and Stonewall. Colby even testified, we destroyed files to protect sources. Well, then stop using those sources. That's my answer. A quote from Senator Church: "We must ensure the intelligence agencies do not undermine the democratic processes they were meant to protect." Too late. Okay. Then, of course, we get into the Reagan administration, and he immediately in 1981 signed executive orders that basically kind of rolled back any of the temporary reform measures that were put in as a result of the 1975 hearings. The Church Committee's revelation shattered illusions about the press's independence. Today, the media conglomerates merge with tech giants, and intelligence leaks favor headlines. The ghost of Mockingbird is with us today. And of course, the best example of that is COVID, right? Russiagate, where all of the mainstream media was in lockstep with the CIA talking points on how Russiagate unfolded. The same thing with COVID, which, as far as I'm concerned, is just another CIA election interference operation that killed people. And not that they mind doing that at all. They've done election interference and regime overthrows that has resulted in the death of millions of people. So that has never been a point of hesitation for them. Okay. One other point, just to go through kind of in, this is not all of them, but I want to highlight a few of them. The Korean War psychological operations, 1950 through 1953. The CIA, in coordination with the U.S. military psychological warfare section, launched extensive propaganda campaigns to demoralize Koreans in general, both North and South, and then primarily focused on the North after they cleaned out the South's nationalist. It included airdropping millions of leaflets, urging defections, broadcasting radio messages. They set up stations called Voice of UN, and basically just, sowed tension in the targeted areas. They were meant to fracture enemy cohesion and encourage defection. There's CIA source documents on that called Psychological Operations in Korea in the National Archives. Operation Passage to Freedom, we've talked about a couple of times in Vietnam, 1954 and 1955 timeframe. And this is the operation that the CIA collaborated with the U.S. Navy's Military Sea Transportation Service and the Catholic Church networks in North Vietnam to orchestrate the relocation of 1 million people, Catholics, from the North into the South. They did it under the guise of humanitarian aid, but people like Colonel Edward Lansdale created a psychological operations warfare campaign that basically consisted of radio broadcast in the local language that said that the communists were going to come any minute and take you all to Siberia. They also said that they were going to commit atrocities like cutting your babies out of women's wombs and murdering all of the little kids in order to scare the shit out of them, to get them to get on an airplane or a ship that they had never even seen in their entire lifetime. And then they forcibly relocated them to the South in order to prop up the guy they had already decided, who was a Catholic, was going to be president in the South, DM. That was one of the first massive psychological operations conducted by the CIA. And it just so happens that DM, the guy the CIA is going to install as the military dictator in the South, his brother was the archbishop in the North. That's crazy. Okay. And then, of course, we can't forget Operation Peter Pan. Talking about child trafficking. Operation Peter Pan was a CIA-engineered psychological warfare campaign to destabilize the Castro regime by separating 14,000 Cuban children from their parents, airlifting them to the United States under false pretenses of any minute the Soviet Union is going to swoop into Cuba. Castro is going to round up all of the Catholic children, put them on a ship, and take them to work camps in Siberia. There was flyers that were handed out. This message was beat into Catholics every time they came to church, that your children are going to be stolen from you by Castro any second. This was in concert with the Catholic Church again. They spread these rumors by the State Department, the CIA, and they even created a radio station called Radio Swan on Swan Island off the coast of Cuba to broadcast this propaganda into Cuba. Um, the psychological operation exploited parental fears, creating social chaos in Cuba and providing a propaganda victory for the United States by portraying Castro as a tyrant. Many children ended up in foster care or camps in Florida. And basically, they also used it as a brain drain because these people that were had their kids in these Catholic schools were kind of what was left of the upper middle class. So they actually talked about it being a brain drain on the country of Cuba by enticing people that they thought were the smartest among the children, some as young as 6 years old, out of Cuba.
Freaking terrible.
It is. But that's how they use psychological operations. And I want to drill this point in. Anyone who would set up a child trafficking operation playing on the fears of parents will literally do anything.
Unrestricted warfare.
It is 100% unrestricted warfare. It's just mind-boggling to me when today, knowing all of this history, people will go, "Oh, that's not possible that they would go that far. There's no way they would go that far." We are under constant psychological attack in the United States today, whether it's with the terrorists that they have here, Antifa, 764, any of these things. The
This
20 million illegal aliens coming in. We are under constant psychological attack.
This one fits the location we're talking about right now. Cuba says boat from Florida opened fire at its soldiers, starting the fight that killed 4 Americans.
I saw that today. I find it interesting that it happens right now.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think would be on a boat that would get that close to Cuba?
I would say Gladio operatives, contractors, intelligence officers. I mean, a lot of people we've discussed.
Yeah. Because you'd have to be, I mean, you're either that or you're retarded. Right? With all of the hype. And that's the same thing you said earlier about people you getting these intel briefs about what was going on in Mexico. So just a normal person, not you or I, that have dug into this kind of information. But do you think that the average American that knows a significant portion of the drugs into the United States come through the southern border, right? Most people know that the southern border is closed primarily. And the United States military is blowing up drug boats in the Gulf of America and the Caribbean, right? Would you take a vacation to Mexico?
Hell no.
So that's my whole point. Who the hell is getting on an airplane to go to, other than Colombia, which I do believe that guy's trying to clean it up, but who would go to Mexico?
I told my oldest, because she lives a little closer to the border than I do with her husband, and I said, you make the phone call if things start to get spicy. And she's like, no, she's like, I actually think they're going to be shutting down for a while. I was like, okay, just for what you're talking about right now. I'm like, I don't want you anywhere near that place, kid. Yeah,
it's just literally crazy. But anyway, I don't know. I guess they live in Never Land. They're probably the people like that was dressing up like frogs at the rebuttal last night.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
talk about psychological operations. So one last example we'll go through real quick. CIA Operation Ajax was the overthrow in 1953 of Mossadegh in Iran. There was a very sophisticated psychological operation that went on there to include basically the stay-behind units in the South and projecting them, training them on how to do psychological operations, where they ended up basically hiring them to stage pro-Shah riots for television clicks, bribing newspaper editors to spread disinformation, creating a narrative that Mossadegh was a communist, and they commandeered radio broadcasts pretending to be communist, embracing Mossadegh in order to create fear that there was a Soviet takeover immediately going to happen. When, as I told you earlier, the amount of Tuda party, which is what they labeled communist in Iran at the time, was less than 4% of the entire population. But their psychological warfare was to blow that up by taking over radio stations, writing articles in the local newspaper about any minute the Soviet Union's coming over the border, and they just scared the hell out of everybody in Iran. Psychological tactics focused on portraying the Shah as a divine restorer of order. And then he comes in and terrorizes everybody for 20 years. They even staged street theater portraying this, basically acting it out. Let's see. That's probably a good place. I've got some other examples like what they did. They actually staged fake bombings in Guatemala. Yeah. And in Chile, they took over an entire newspaper there. They actually bought the newspaper, the main newspaper, like what would be the New York Times. The CIA bought it and was running it.
Because they know it's effective. There's a reason George Soros started buying all kinds of radio stations in the United States, folks. They know it works.
Yes. And, I think we have throughout this whole show tied it into modern day things. But what I would like you to do, kind of just to close this out, is share some of your insight on how you notice these things on platforms like X. What is it that you look for?
Yeah, I'll give the short and skinny here because we're getting close to that time. I got to go and make the other boss happy here in a little bit. Here's one of the big things that I'll tell people. If you've been on any social media platform for a reasonable length of time to where you've been following somebody, this is one of the easiest markers to raise a red flag for you. If somebody's behavior has been consistently somewhere, their ideologies, their political positions, and then out of nowhere, there's an immediate shift in the different direction, and there's not some type of large-scale event that can give a rational person to be like, okay, that happened, and this, could have made that person shift their position. In the absence of something like that, you have to ask yourself, people don't normally just shift their habits or their political positions like that. What happened? And when you start to monitor, that's one thing. The other thing that I look at is I look at people, and you see this a lot. If I see certain large accounts use a word or a phrase, I'll immediately go into social media and copy it and paste it and search it, and I see, okay, I know everybody that got the first tier of the script, because the scripts come in tiers. And, depending how much traction they got with that first group of people. And that allows me to kind of pick, okay, who's working together? What do the bubbles look like? But here's the other thing. I can also look at the counter one, because the counter one's going to respond in kind. with the same thing, a scripted rebuttal. And so you can literally look at these two factions battling back and forth. And then you got to ask yourself, well, is this, what if I don't know the facts here and these are opinions and positions, where am I falling emotionally? And so, there's a lot. I mean, we could do a whole show just on that.
But what you just described is strategy of tension, right? So you have this narrative out here, then they deploy this narrative to polarize people. And understand, this is probably the most critical part of this entire thing, is they're on both sides.
Yep.
They deploy the narrative and they deploy the counter narrative.
If your favorite influencer isn't pissing off both sides, he probably works for one of the sides, or her. just saying.
Yeah.
Colonel, as we fly out of here, where can people find you to see more of that phenomenal freaking intro?
That intro starts my show at 4:00 every day on Rumble. You don't get to see it on X because they don't do the video part over there, but we just started a couple of days ago opening our Rumble show at 4:00 every day with that video. You can find it on my X profile. It's pinned. And, other than the show that I do at noon on Friday with War Hamster, I've been doing quite a bit of shows. I mean, I've had some days where I've had to do 4 shows in one day. So yeah, shout out to Tommy Podcast. He has me working like 3 or 4 days a week.
That's what we need. It's at your cost, Colonel, but is definitely what we need. You guys, all those links down in the description below. I will play not play our last ad on the way out. And then I got a final thought for you guys that I think you'll enjoy, especially given this conversation. Look, we spend our whole lives on digital platforms, but the things that actually matter deserve to be captured in the real world. That's why I use Word notebooks. They've got the standard memorandum, a pocket-sized daily record to track your legacy year by year, the adventure log for documenting your travels and expeditions, and then their standard bullet journals and a unique organized system to keep your daily tasks sharp. These are made right here in the USA. They aren't just notebooks, they are high-quality, durable tools built for people who value independence and want to pass their stories down, not lose them in a cloud. So stop scrolling and start recording. Head to wordnotebooks.com. That's wordnotebooks.com and grab one and use the code RUMBLE15, RUMBLE15 to grab yours today, folks. If you want to have a little bit more insight, this was not planned, but I was invited to come on Devolution Power Hour tonight. And some of the conversation we're going to have here will be some kind of tied into this conversation. It just happens to work out that way sometimes. Call it divine, if you want. But with that, Colonel, I appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Good night. God bless, and Semper Fi, everybody.